What is up, everybody? I just got getting over it finally, and I played a little bit. It's a very difficult game, and in honor of that, I thought he'd come back to the knockoff that got my inspiration to play the game. Getting over it on Scratch by Griff Patch. Very beautiful game. Got me used to the controls before I could get the actual game. Just a beautiful game, and I'll see it plays so much better than uh, the actual game, and I love it. And my old speedrun time was 4 minutes with this mode, because that's all I would do some days.
And starting over. If you've broken your Scratch project moments after you've shared it, as I have, or you spent hours working
I
on a
missed
project,
this game so
only to
much.
notice too late that one of your sprites has unexplainably gone missing. If you've made use of that difficult-to-name
The actual game is so much
within the
harder.
sensing category, amazingly useful, but
It slides.
due to a
Like,
Scratch bug,
this
of leaving you
holds,
crying as it
but in the
dumps
actual
all
game,
your
it
scripts in
slides
one big
if
unordered
you aren't
heap.
like on a direct
If you've made
position.
real progress coding a game over the course of the week, only to come back the next day to discover you weren't even logged in, nothing has been saving. Starting over is harder
So
than starting
difficult.
up. If you're not ready for that, like if you've already had a bad day at school, then what you're about to go through may be too much. Feel free to go away and come back.
Griff's voice
I'll
is
be
just
here.
amazing.
All
So,
right.
like, I was
Thanks for
playing
coming
the
with me on
actual
this trip.
game. It took
You'll
me
understand if you need to take a break
15
at any
minutes to
point.
get to this point.
Just find a safe place to stop and remember to pause the game by pressing P. On Scratch, you can find loads of remixed or reimagined recreations of existing games. And with good reason.
This part was
George
so
Bernard
difficult,
Shaw
and I
said,
got past it.
Imitation is
I
not
never
just
beat
the
the. I haven't
sincerest
beaten the
form of
game yet,
flattery.
and I'd like
It's
to
the
do that
sincerest
on
form of
another
learning.
video. Hopefully
This
next
game
week.
is a recreation of a game that came out in 2017, titled
I'm in full
Getting Over
screen.
It with Bennett Foddy. That game in turn was a homage to a free game that came out in 2002. Both games involved dragging yourself, using a hammer, up a mountain assembled
It
from
was made
assets
like
and objects
2011
sourced
or
from many
something.
other games.
And
It seems
that's what
appropriate
gave
then that
Bennett
when
Foddy
trying
his
to recreate
inspiration.
Getting Over It in Scratch,
It was just
that we
a
should
throwaway
construct our
game.
mountain from the same assets used
I
in
should
literally
turn the
millions of
audio
Scratch
off.
projects, the unmistakable contents of the Scratch costume library.
I even made
Unlike
my own
Unity or
rendition
Unreal,
of
Scratch
this
does not provide
version.
you with a built-in physics or 3D rendering
It
engine.
wasn't that good.
There's no state-of-the-art
Much harder
debugger.
than this
You
one,
can't even
but
pause your
not
scripts.
that good.
We are forced to program old school. Our experience capped at 30 frames per second.
Already
with a
up here,
480
and I
by
haven't even
360
made it to
pixel
that
stage.
point yet. I haven't made
These
it to
very
this point in
restrictions
the actual
force
game.
us to
I
experiment,
just did it now in
think
2
out of the
minutes
box,
on this
to
version.
grow as developers as we become masters of all things Scratch. And let's not forget, what we
No,
lack in technology, we make up for in community.
I actually almost
This
died.
fantastic bunch of
If
budding
this was
software engineers,
the actual
building,
game, I would have
learning,
been dead.
creating, playing,
I would have
remixing,
fallen.
as diverse a group of people as the very Scratch assets we now so skillfully attempt to ascend.
The controls in this version are
The
so
act of
much better.
climbing, in the
The
digital
actual game
world
is
or
so
in the real
annoying.
world, has certain essential properties that give the game its flavour.
I wish the screen was
No
back
amount of
bigger.
forward progress is
I'm gonna be
guaranteed.
honest. I need to play this on like
When
a
you start getting
huge
over it,
monitor.
you're standing next to a dead tree, which blocks the way to the entire rest of the game. You prod and poke at it,
I'm not getting any
exploring the
world
limits
record
of
time
your
on
reach
this.
and strength, trying to
Probably
find the
because
way
I
up.
went up this part instead of
When
just
starting a new Scratch
doing the
project,
swing thing
that
like
initial
everybody else
blank
does.
slate is both refreshing and at times a little scary. Wouldn't it be great
Yeah, like
if we could
swing
travel
from
forward
down
in
there
time
onto the
and review our
staircase.
finished projects to see
But
how
I don't
well they
want to do
turned out?
that.
I certainly wish we could.
Now I have to.
The real draw of coding, what gives it that special zing, is the challenge of accomplishing something you've never done before.
So I don't want to redo this. I
At
don't
this
want to
point,
redo that
you
part.
don't want to fall into the trap of rushing into creating loads of content, designing all the levels, the player costumes, all the easier stuff that can be perfected later. No, before all that,
I
you
made
need
the
to prod
mistake
and
of
poke that
going
tree.
on the
That is,
higher
understanding
piece.
the coding difficulties you're expecting to face and
Took
trying
me
out
forever
any
to learn
ideas
this
to solve them.
game. Because
may
I
not
think my
be
record's
able
like
to
4
time
minutes,
travel,
34
but at
seconds.
least this way you can get a good idea of how
I'm not
well your
making that.
project is likely to go, and potentially save yourself a lot of time. This project began life a couple of months ago as 3 simple scripts: the player, hammer, and level. I spent no time on the art, just using ScratchGat and a few rectangles drawn in the sprite editor. The scripts for the player quickly mocked up in a similar fashion to
so
those
well
I teach
made,
on my YouTube channel.
especially like the
With the
hammer and the
hammer, I
player.
had to improvise because
Controls
I've
are
never
more
done anything quite
impressive
like
than
that
the
before.
game.
And boy, did I prod and poke at those scripts.
I
What
don't
I had
want to
imagined
there.
and the results I was achieving were hard to reconcile.
Yeah, we've made it
The
to, I
hammer and the
believe,
player
what is
sprites would
orange
get
in the
stuck
actual
in the
game.
walls and ground, shake and jiggle and clip up to the top of the screen. Most of all, when I tried the bread and butter action of lifting the player up upon the hammer.
Falling on this part is
Any
the
tiny
worst thing
movement
ever.
would throw the player into a crazy up and down motion as if bouncing
That was
upon
so
a possessed pogo stick. Things don't
I hate
always
these
turn
rocks.
out as you want them to.
Those rocks are the
And
worst
sometimes
part,
it's
and
good
I'm
to
gonna
take
hate
a
them in the
break.
actual game.
So, for the time
I
being, I
eventually do
shelved the
this
project,
for the two
letting
people
it
who
slowly
watch.
slip down the list of unshared projects, joining the countless multitude of unfinished, unseen projects
He does
that haunt the
talking.
vast storage archives of MIT. Have you, as you've been playing this game, stopped to wonder how you can balance on a hammer that is held out to one side? It feels quite natural in game, but try to
Yeah, I did.
and not get the heat off the ground.
Okay.
No, this game is bending the rules of physics. Although I was not actively working on the project, the desire to code the game and solve the initial problems
You may
constantly
or may
played
not
on my
see that in
mind.
the final cut, but my
Finally, I
mom just
decided
asked
to
me
give it another go.
if lunch was good. So
Research
I may or may
is a
not cut that
powerful
out,
tool.
depending on how lazy I'm
Don't
feeling.
just rely on what you think you know. YouTube can be a great resource for gameplay videos. Being able to pause and rewind the
think I
action
will
is
probably.
invaluable. Did you know
I
that you can
don't
step through
particularly want
videos
that in
frame
the
by
final
frame
cut,
using the angled bracket
but
keys?
I don't know, maybe
My
not.
research helped
Maybe I'll
confirm
show
many
you
thoughts I'd been having,
the
and also uncovered some nuances around the
uncut
mouse
version.
movement that had really got me stumped.
Because why not? And also,
All this was food for my brain, and I was super fired up to bring it all to scratch. And so, back in Scratch, I completely
very
restructured the player and hammer scripts,
simple game.
bringing the scripts together in a
Simple
single
game.
sprite. This allowed the movement of the two objects to be tracked together and to move dependent on each other. Of course, in coding, as in real life, you often have to compromise. It isn't reasonable to implement a full physics engine in Scratch,
Yeah.
but often it's enough to create a good estimate of what the player is expecting. 1 + 1 is 2.
There
If
we
this
go.
wasn't always the case, if
Ah.
sometimes the answer was 3, then we would be in trouble. The addition operator is therefore referred to as deterministic. Similarly, in
Let's go.
Scratch, if your player sprite reports that it isn't touching the level, then
720.
you would expect,
A
assuming the
beautiful
player
time.
is not moved relative to the level, that
Uh,
this would continue
Thank
to be
you
the
for
case.
watching.
As it turns out, the
and I know
sensing block
Griff
in
Badge is
Scratch
still-
does not behave like this. It can be non-deterministic.
I know Griff Patch is
This
still
is down to
annoying,
how
but
Scratch draws
goodbye.
its sprites.